Intra-Yemeni consultations commence in Riyadh today amid Houthi militia's deliberate boycott. Coalition in Yemen announces a ceasefire during Ramadan to ensure success of Yemeni dialogue. Government forces take fierce clashes with Houthi militia in Ma'rib and inflict heavy losses on them. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Rushan Fuad. The Yemeni consultations under the umbrella of the Gulf Cooperation Council launched today in the Saudi capital, Riyadh. Most of the political forces announced their participation in these consultations except the Houthi rebels. The GCC invited about 500 Yemeni figures to participate in these talks. More details on this story are in the following report.
The intra-Yemeni consultations kicked off in Riyadh on Wednesday. The consultations, the largest since the coup by the Iran-backed Houthi militias in 2014, are being sponsored by the Gulf Cooperation Council. They are bringing together Yemenis from across the country to discuss peace and are set to conclude on April 7. Present at the opening were GCC Secretary General Dr. Naif Al-Hajraf, United Nations Envoy Hans Grunberg, and United States Envoy Tim Linderking. The Houthis have not attended the talks despite being invited. In addition, Al-Hajraf renewed his invitation to them on Tuesday. He went on to say that the consultations are a platform for diagnosing the situation in the country so that it can move from war to peace. He also added that the Yemeni solution is in the Yemeni people's hands. In addition, Grunberg underscored the pressing need to support a comprehensive solution in Yemen. He noted that Riyadh had led Yemeni dialogues that had led to positive results. The Yemeni people want fair and lasting peace, he added. They have stressed to the UN their desire to end the war. Grunberg described the ceasefire as a step in the right direction. Grunberg added,
"The longer the conflict goes on, the more severe the impact on civilians and the more difficult to reverse the damage. The Yemeni people need to see a clear path out. Yemen needs more support, including from its GCC neighbors, to improve basic services, including access to electricity, ensure security, and stabilize the economy. I also hope this meeting will convey a genuine sense of urgency on the need for dialogue, compromise, and commitment to a peaceful solution to the conflict."
For his part, Linderking said the U.S. supports the Yemeni parties in reaching a comprehensive peaceful solution. He added the consultations are an international commitment to make the situation more stable. In addition, Linderking stated,
"The United States strongly supports the UN's proposal for an immediate truce. This UN truce proposal could serve as a first step towards a comprehensive ceasefire and a new, more inclusive political process. Yemenis across the country are desperate for relief. This requires support from the entire international community."
Yemen is still one of the largest humanitarian crises in the world. More than half of Yemen's population is unable to access food for survival, and the rate of poverty and hunger is increasing every day. Since the conflict escalated in March 2015, the country has become a living hell for all Yemenis.
The Saudi-led coalition in Yemen announced a unilateral ceasefire in Yemen. The coalition said it will stop hostilities by virtue of the truce, which began at 6 a.m. on Wednesday to ensure success of the political talks. The following report has more details on this.
The Saudi-led coalition backing the Yemeni government against Houthi rebels in Yemen's conflict announced a ceasefire from Wednesday morning and peace talks during the Islamic month of Ramadan starting next month. It said in a statement carried by the Saudi press agency that it will start the cessation of military operations in Yemen beginning at 6 a.m. Wednesday, March 30, 2022. The announcement coincides with the launch of Yemeni consultations with the aim of creating an appropriate conditions for the success of the consultations and creating a positive environment during the holy month of Ramadan for peacemaking in Yemen. The rebels have shunned the meeting in Riyadh, which is hosted by the Gulf Cooperation Council and involves the Yemeni government, US, and United Nations envoys to Yemen. However, the coalition's announcement comes after an official told media sources that Saudi Arabia was waiting for serious steps from Yemen's rebels on a potential prisoner swap before responding to their own offer of a ceasefire that was declared by the Houthis a day before in a unilateral way. The Iran-backed Houthis called for a 3-day truce and conditioned the offer that the Saudis end their blockade and airstrikes and remove coalition forces from Yemen. The rebels said an agreement had been reached to free 1,400 of their fighters in exchange of 823 pro-government personnel, including 16 Saudis and 3 Sudanese. The brother of the Yemeni President Abdrabbu Mansour Hadi is among the prisoners set for release, but the Yemeni government, for its part, said the exchange was under consideration. The last prisoner swap between the government and the Houthi rebels was on October 2020, when 1,056 people were released on each side, according to the Red Cross.
Sources of Houthi militants were killed and injured after the government forces repelled their successive attacks south of Ma'rib. Military sources said the rebels have tried to recover some of the locations they have lost during the past few days. He added that the artillery of the government forces launched an intense bombardment targeting separate militia reinforcements and gatherings along the southern front, inflicting heavy losses on them in equipment and lives. A child was injured in an explosion of a war projectile left by the Houthi militia in Lahj Governorate, southern Yemen. Sources stated that the projectile exploded while the child was playing with it. Human rights reports indicate that the Houthi militia has, over the past years, planted more than 2 million mines in several governorates, killing thousands of civilians. Tribal gunmen cut the main road linking the governorates of Taiz and Aden. The sources pointed out that the militants are demanding the release of prisoners held by the authorities in Lahj Governorate. Passengers and drivers complain about the spread of dozens of checkpoints along the road linking Taiz, Lahj, and Aden. They reported being subjected to financial extortion and the imposition of illegal taxes. The security sector in the western coast detained 2 terrorist cells planted by the Houthi militia in the liberated areas. The security sector clarified that the 2 cells were entrusted with planting explosive devices in order to target officers and social figures and to disturb the security in the western coast. It revealed that the 2 cells were run by the so-called Security and Intelligence Service of the Houthi militia. Human rights activists denounced the death of a minor prisoner in a Houthi prison in the city of Ib. Reports said there are widespread violations in the prisons of the Houthi militia, where they practice horrific practices against the prisoners. The terrorist Houthi militia continues to systematically commit crimes against civilians in areas that are under their control. Local sources said kidnappings of opponents of the militia increased, and the militia has kidnapped a lawyer from a street in the capital, Sana'a. The Lawyers Association condemned the kidnapping, describing the incidents as a criminal act, pointing out that this constitutes a danger to society and public peace. The Houthi militia has destroyed everything in the country. Recently, they burned farms and property of citizens in El Dala Governorate. The Houthi burning comes in a series of crimes committed by the rebels against civilians and properties. More on this story is in the following report.
Not satisfied with their previous crimes, which they practice on a daily basis against the homeland and the citizen, but they also mastered the manufacture of crimes and the destruction of plows and offspring. A new crime documented by Yemen Today channel's camera from Maris region, north and west of Al-Dala, which shows that the Houthi militia burned farms, wells, homes and properties of citizens in valleys near the villages of Higlan, Solan, Al-Rifqa, Ya'is and other areas in the north and west of Al-Dala, tampering and destroying the most important sources of income for many families, with the loss of millions of riyals.
As you can see here, the valley has been completely burnt with all its equipment, wells, and behind this tree you can see there cars have been burned too. The valley has been completely destroyed. Citizens lost their properties and belongings after they have fled from their own cities, homes to this place.
Continuous violations of the Houthi militia against civilians in the north and west of Al-Tala to make the reality of their criminal project clear, as many activists describe the crime of burning citizens' farms and properties who have nothing to do with the war situation as a dangerous precedent and hysteria in which Houthi militia suffers from after their inability to make any progress, and expose the falseness of their talks about the homeland, the citizen and his interests, and peace.
The Houthi militia is centered in these mountainous areas that overlook this valley, in which they have burned the farms, homes, buildings and the stations next to this farm.
A new crime added to the Houthi rebel list of crimes, while citizens' loss are estimated in millions, and all they are asking for is the interference of the concerned authorities.
Coming next. As the war in Yemen enters its 8th year, children continue to bear the brunt of it.
أقول لك راحت بالغداء لأهلها شلت الغداء وراحت بأهلها في المزرعة، والمزرعة ركبت على حمار ما حتى نص المزرعة وانفجر فيها اللغم، دعست على اللغم وانفجر فيهم. الحمار انتهى الماء ترفت بقعت رجليها كامل. نغير منها غير الشبعلة اللي هي البنت سابحة من دور رجليها، لما صافناها طبية أقرب طبية وصافناها لهنا بطلت رجليها كامل.
التزود هلي وقابل لي لعب وطبعت تحت الزوايا.
Welcome back. UNICEF in Saudi Arabia announced a new $7 million contribution to support UNICEF education interventions in Yemen. The funding will help increase access to quality education for girls and boys through formal, non-formal, and alternative education opportunities. The project aims to reach about 600,000 children. The Yemen conflict has hit another shameful milestone as reports talk about more than 10,000 children killed or maimed since fighting started in March 2015. According to the International Red Cross, the war kills 4 children every day, and many more child deaths and injuries go unrecorded. More on the suffering of children during years of conflict is within this report.
As the war reaches its 7th year, an average of 4 children have lost their lives every day to the bloody conflict in Yemen. Half of schools and healthcare facilities in Yemen are not operational due to bombing damage or destruction by airstrikes. Since the beginning of the conflict, there have been at least 376 airstrikes against educational facilities across the country. At least 377,000 people have died as a result of the war since 2015. 40% from airstrikes, and 60% from illness, which would have been preventable if not for the conflict. This equates to around 4 children every day. Between March 2015 and February 2021, 3,336 children have been killed in Yemen. Yemen Country Director for Save the Children warned that children had no safe place to hide, with schools and hospitals ravaged by repeated and senseless fighting. Yemen's children continue to face catastrophic levels of hunger, and their families are struggling to feed them or keep them safe, with more than 12 million children in need of aid and 2 million children under 5 acutely malnourished. With extreme poverty comes a rise in child labor, sexual exploitation and child marriage, as children are pulled out of school to help their families. Children, particularly boys, are coerced into dangerous and exploitative forms of child labor, including joining armed groups. At least 3,600 children are believed to have been recruited to armed groups since the beginning of the conflict. Girls are particularly at risk from child marriage. Nearly 3/4 of girls in Yemen get married before they turn 18. Children's playgrounds are turned into graveyards. 4 children were killed in Hodeidah in an attack near a communications tower because they were seeking light to play. That story tells you a lot. People just want to live. Children want to go out and play football, and they get killed for that. Whenever the conflict in Yemen flares and violence escalates, children are the ones who pay the heaviest price. Yet, all they can do is stand and dream of a better future.
The current level of hunger in Yemen is unprecedented and is causing severe hardship for millions of people. Despite ongoing humanitarian assistance, 17.4 million Yemenis are food insecure. This number is expected to go up to 19 million by December 2022. The Fung Report has more details on this.
The current level of hunger in Yemen is unprecedented and is causing severe hardship for millions of people. The UN's World Food Program called for $765 million aid in the next 6 months to maintain current levels of assistance in Yemen. The Global Food Agency said on Twitter that the level of hunger is at a record high, with 13 million people counting on the assistance. Last month, the UN Coordination for Humanitarian Affairs also warned that 11 million people in Yemen will end up closer to starvation due to shortage of funding for life-saving activities in Yemen. Yemen has been living by violence and instability since 2014, when Houthi rebels captured much of the country, including the capital Sana'a. About 80%, or about 30 million people, needing humanitarian assistance and protection, and more than 13 million are in danger of starvation, according to UN estimates. The humanitarian situation in Yemen is extremely fragile, and any disruption in the pipeline of critical supplies such as food, fuel, and medicines has the potential to bring millions of people closer to starvation and death. WFP calls for unrestricted access to reach those most in need and avert famine.
Here is a reminder of the main headlines. Intra-Yemeni consultations commence in Riyadh today amid Houthi militias that are bid boycott. Coalition in Yemen announces a ceasefire during Ramadan to ensure success of Yemeni dialogue. Government forces take fierce clashes with Houthi militia in Ma'rib and inflict heavy losses on them. This is the end of the news. For more, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Yemen Today English. It's Roshane Fouad. Thank you for watching.